Hey guys, this is Joe, founder and host of Startuprad.io. As you guys may already know, I've run this podcast full-time since January 2021. I'm very happy to announce that Anchor FM is my sponsor for this podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free and it's easy to use, even for a newbie. They're creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Welcome to Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io, your startup podcast and YouTube blog from Germany. Today we have a little premiere here. We have the first startup from little Liechtenstein here. If you've never heard of this country, it's an independent country. It is nestled between Austria and Switzerland in the Alps. For everybody out there, that's inside of Europe. And they're very small. They're smaller than the island of Manhattan with a small population. They are way ahead on the blockchain. That's what we are talking about today, and I would like to welcome my guest from Amazing Blogs based in Liechtenstein. Hey Nicolas, how you doing?
Hey Joe, thank you for having me. I'm fine, a little sick still, but thankfully no corona, so I'm good. And you?
I'm doing great, thank you. As always, my frequent listeners already know that. I have been looking at your profile here in LinkedIn. Actually, we may tell the people you are the guy in the suit and neither the dog nor the old lady, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on from which perspective you're looking, but I'm the guy in the suit, yes, with my grandma and my dog. I kind of like to portray myself as someone, who's like a family person, so I think I kind of wanted to distance myself from the typical LinkedIn CV pictures, I guess.
I see. Everybody would like to reach out to you directly. Of course, go down here in the show notes wherever you're seeing or listening, wherever you're watching this or listening to this podcast. There'll be a link to our blog post. And of course, on the blog post, there's a link to your personal LinkedIn profile. I have seen that you've been not necessarily a developer in terms of software development, but rather your CV shows a lot of automotive experience. How did you end up with a blockchain company?
Yeah, well, I think like many people that join the blockchain space, I first had to go my way through the traditional world of finance and business. In terms of automotive, I was born and raised in Karlsruhe, Germany. And obviously Karlsruhe is in the state of Baden-Württemberg. And here, the car industry, the automotive industry is quite, has quite a cluster, especially with Stuttgart being close. So hence, in my early days, I started working for Daimler. I kind of went through the production processes, kind of experienced a global player firsthand there. Also because my grandpa back in the days used to own a car shop and a car reparation. So therefore, in the beginning, I guess I just wanted to kind of follow my family's steps, but this kind of quickly changed though.
We may add for all the people out there listening in Poland, Japan, mainland China, wherever you're out there. Stuttgart is a city in the southwest of Germany. You may not know it personally, but products coming from there, like companies are headquartered there, like Bosch, Mercedes, Mercedes-Benz, aka Daimler, because the company behind it is called Daimler-Benz, as well as Porsche. So you can already see, oh yeah, there is a big manufacturing cluster there. Actually, from the information I have, it's the biggest machine building and automotive cluster in the whole world. So Karlsruhe, I would count it in the Stuttgart bucket there within the cluster, and that totally makes sense that you've been working in automotive. Let's talk a little bit about how you turned towards blockchain. What was your first experience? How did you learn about blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, I think like everybody in blockchain, everybody has like their wow moments that kind of get them into the blockchain space. For me, it was on the one hand, going through the traditional world of business, or experience it firsthand and seeing just the many inefficiencies there. On the one hand, of course, the costly and time consuming processes, the amount of paperwork that especially companies in Germany, I would think, have to go through or handle their processes with, on the one hand. But on the other hand, also in terms of looking at the world as a whole, I'm someone who is kind of also interested in social consciousness and financial inclusion. So when I really started hearing about something that can be used as a payment for cross-border payments, peer-to-peer, within seconds, I was like, okay, how is this possible? And I kind of started back in 2015, 2016, doing my own research, because I have some friends also from Gambia, for instance, that send money to their families every month, and obviously have to see and figure out, like, okay, how am I going to avoid maybe having to pay 10% of fees to Western Union and aspects and companies like this, and therefore I kind of started getting interested in this new technology of blockchain. In the beginning, like many people, probably thought, okay, hey, blockchain, Bitcoin is something that's used for payments. I mean, nowadays everybody is combining blockchain technology with Bitcoin directly. Most people think, okay, Bitcoin is blockchain, basically, especially early stage people in this space. It was the same for me, to be honest, but I quickly started learning the amount of possibilities that blockchain inherits as a technology to disrupt just about any sector in business in our world. And for me personally, I started kind of trying out a couple of the protocols. I started investing a bit too. I mean, I guess everybody kind of made their mistakes in the ICO craze a bit, but I learned from it. And I think for me personally, the ICO craze especially was a very healthy and meaningful period where I learned a lot for my future. Because first of all, I mean, I learned to critically assess blockchain protocols a bit more. I made some important lessons, but on the other hand, I think throughout the ICO craze, especially when all the negative aspects came into force, you could really see, okay, the established and trustworthy protocols kind of crystallized themselves as well. On the other hand, they were the protocols where you were able to see development and progress in the future, and you were able to see that they actually trying to, or are actually in the process of still building something, whereas the other protocols and projects, the scams, so to say, were the ones where you suddenly didn't hear anything anymore.
Mm-hmm. What was interesting for me is I like to read about financial history. Yeah, I know I'm a real geek. But the basic blueprint, except for the big scams of blockchain, was a development on steroids you've seen in the dot-com bubble, but not only in the dot-com bubble, but also in railway mania back in the 19th century. And if you go back, like tulips and stuff like this, it seems to be a very underlying human psychology phenomenon that you actually totally overrate a new technology at the beginning, and then at one point, if there's really a basis to it, it'll turn out to be really game changing. But it has to go through a hype cycle first, I do believe. But we are now getting a little bit into your company Amazing Blocks. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing and how the Liechtenstein Token Act plays a role in it. A little hint here, we also talked about indirectly about the Liechtenstein Token Act as a hint, as a blueprint in our interview with Professor Philipp Sandner of the Frankfurt School, who is advising the German government in setting up their own blockchain law, for which, of course, the Liechtenstein Token Act is a great inspiration. And if you would like to learn more about this, go down here in the show notes. There is a link to the interview. Now, let's go to Amazing Blocks and you guys.
Yeah, so funny that you mentioned Philipp Sandner. He's very convinced of the current state in Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein is an inconspicuous country, obviously, and I'm sure most of your listeners have not or barely heard about it. However, in terms of regulation, Liechtenstein is very forward-thinking and future-oriented. The Liechtenstein Token Act or Blockchain Act or TVTG, I mean, it has many names, came into force in January of this year, 2020. And it has a unique aspect because, security token offerings and security token laws have been kind of slowly developing. In some jurisdictions, like for instance, even Germany, you were able to tokenize aspects or financial instruments such as debt or participation certificates. However, so far it's not really possible to tokenize equity, which is kind of from a neutral perspective. I really do not understand why it's not the case yet. However, it obviously makes sense from the perspective that regulators first have to kind of tap into the technology and find out what it means. Liechtenstein implemented the Token Act as a complete new law, other than, for instance, Switzerland, which is currently looking into, adding to existing laws in terms of preparing themselves for the blockchain space and Web 3.0, which is approaching. The Token Act kind of relies on the token container model. The token container model, you can kind of imagine it's like a container where any right or asset can be placed, and therefore the token acts as a physical embodiment of these assets and rights. And here that allows true equity and ownership tokens. On the other hand, you sure can also tokenize debt and participation certificates and other financial instruments. But the true unique aspects about the Liechtenstein Token Act are these two parts, debt and equity. And also what's quite interesting about the Token Act is that the Token Act doesn't really, of course, the name unofficially is Token Act or a Blockchain Act. However, the official name is Trusted Technology. Or it relies on a trusted technology, which can be blockchain, but doesn't have to be blockchain. And this is also, I think, a very interesting part of this law that allows kind of a much more broader degree of flexibility for companies and pioneers leveraging it. And here, at Amazing Blocks, we are first mover in the space of legally compliant tokenization, of legally compliant equity tokenization. We were founded in August of this year officially. Obviously, like any startup before, we had our stealth mode, basically, where we kind of started developing. But how we founded ourselves? We founded ourselves with Ethereum as initial contribution. Which is one of the other core benefits the Liechtenstein Token Act inherits, because you do not need a bank account, so to say, in Liechtenstein. You can basically found your SPV in Liechtenstein fully remotely. without having to travel to Liechtenstein, without having to adhere to lawyers or notaries in Liechtenstein per se. And also with you can use your typical bank at home for operating purposes of your SPV in Liechtenstein, your legal entity in Liechtenstein. And this is what we did to ourselves. And this can also be verified on Etherscan, this transaction. And subsequently after this, we also generated our first equity tokens of the Amazing Blocks equity tokens, which can also be verified on Etherscan as well. For the listeners, that you can all find this on my LinkedIn profile. I'm also the writer at Amazing Blocks, so therefore there's a lot of information there. But yeah, I mean, the Liechtenstein Token Act just kind of is a perfect demonstration of a sure small regulator like Liechtenstein. I think Liechtenstein has a population of around 50,000. But this just clearly shows that these small regulators just have the chance to adapt far more quickly to the ever-changing world of technology than for instance, jurisdictions like the US or the EU, which sure kind of drafted MiCA a couple of weeks ago. However, especially a lot of the newly drafted laws in this world are actually using Liechtenstein as a role model.
A small country leading the world. I like that. We have listeners from more than 180 countries out there. Just between you, me, and a few 10,000s of listeners. Can you tell? Can you go a little bit more into detail? Because what I found very interesting, as not living in Liechtenstein, you can set up a legal entity there. How did you do that? You reach out to a law firm there. And secondly, you don't even need a bank account there. My question would be, could you also work like with an American, with a Chinese bank account, or does it have to be in the European Union?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good question. The benefit of Liechtenstein is that Liechtenstein has EU passporting as being a member of the European Economic Area. Therefore, as correctly stated, a European bank account is not an issue. China and the US is a little tricky here, obviously, especially in the US. The SEC is paying a lot of attention and being very careful and very hesitant. From a theoretical perspective, it is possible to leverage the Token Act from any jurisdiction in the world. But I would highly suggest before especially when you come from the US or China, these two conglomerates on each side of the world, you kind of have to be a bit careful because sure, you have EU passporting with the Liechtenstein Token Act. Sure, it's a law that is applicable in any country or that is verifiable or verified in any country in the world. But you still have to kind of take care or look in your own garden, so to say, because especially in US, it can be still quite difficult. However, I see progress in the US as well, as INX. For those that have not heard about it, INX is a fully regulated crypto assets exchange that was the first to actually receive an SEC approval. And we are also in talks with them, which are also kind of considering Liechtenstein as a very auspicious jurisdiction for the future, especially when talking about integrating tokenized assets into crypto exchanges. Because the benefit about Liechtenstein is, as long as you have set up an SPV in Liechtenstein, which kind of functions as an umbrella, you can basically tokenize anything. So like it doesn't matter where this asset is located, as long as it's legally binding, owned by this SPV, by this umbrella in Liechtenstein. And also, what is quite interesting in Liechtenstein is that you do not have to just have a traditional AG, which is kind of similar to our American listeners, like an LLC. You can also have a kind of what's called a PCC, which kind of functions as an umbrella, and then you can have from a balance sheet perspective, several independent AGs tokenized below the umbrella of the tokenized, governor, so to say, and then each AG would be an independent asset. And for instance, asset A could be also something that is located in the US, which then would also allow you to have a bank account in the US. It could be also asset B could be an asset which is a machine in China, for instance, which is associated with a Chinese bank account. So therefore, from our understanding and our perspective, sure, you have to take care of certain precautionary steps if you especially talk about these two sensitive jurisdictions, but just from a neutral perspective and a theoretical perspective, it is possible. Yeah.
Very good answer and very thorough. For everybody who's a little bit more interested, we'll link down here in the show notes an article on the Liechtenstein Token Act in English, and we also find a non-official transcript of the 172 pages of the Liechtenstein Token Act, which you can find down here in the show note as well. The link will directly open a PDF. Now we have laid the grounds for the SPV Liechtenstein Token Act. So what is Amazing Blocks doing on like this base?
Amazing Blocks is first mover in Liechtenstein. And what this means is we are one of the first, or probably the first company to actually leverage the Token Act. We were the first company ever to found ourselves, as mentioned, with Ethereum as initial contribution, and therefore allowing a bankless incorporation. And we are the first ever to actually generate true equity tokens for an AG in Liechtenstein. And from our service perspective, to anyone that's interested, we on the one hand kind of consult our clients throughout the establishment process. How do we do this? We have with our close collaboration with legal partners such as Nicolas attorneys at law, which are actually involved in drafting this profound legal framework in Liechtenstein, and other law firms, and being in close contact also with the Liechtenstein authorities. We kind of developed a blueprint and templates for the establishment process. Typically, the establishment process of a legal entity in Liechtenstein can take up to 3 to 4 months. With our blueprint, which is a detailed guide explaining each step of the way, each day specifically, you can kind of reduce the setup time to 3 to 4 weeks. And you do not have to travel to Liechtenstein at all. And another benefit here is that we provide basically this blueprint free of charge to our clients, because this is not our main focus in terms of our product. So therefore, the clients can decide, okay, hey, do I want to take care of each step myself, especially when addressing, or when we address, early stage startups, which have to save costs, obviously, or do I want to outsource these steps to for instance, Amazing Blocks? And so basically, we covered the entire life cycle in terms of establishment. And then on the other hand, on top of this, our main product consists of our software solution, which is a software as a service called TokenPad. And this is like kind of, also covering the entire life cycle. So it's an issuance platform to generate the tokens. So therefore, you can mint and subsequently issue the tokens to whitelisted Ethereum addresses. It's an administration platform which covers aspects such as role assignment for the addresses, the whitelisting aspect. And then you can also have investor onboarding with KYC and AML in our platform. So basically, we call it fundraising on the go, where within a 20 to 30 minute time frame, you can onboard new investors, enter their respective information needed for the Liechtenstein authorities, like Ethereum wallet address, contact information, date of birth, and so on. And then you can, after going through this process and registering the shareholder, you can subsequently already issue first mint and then issue these equity tokens to the respective wallet addresses. Also, what is a unique aspect that we have, and which kind of differentiates us from from other tokenization platforms is that we have a digital share register, which is completely valid in terms of complying with the Liechtenstein authorities. It's integrated into our software and can also be, for instance, downloaded as a PDF very easily. So you can also have it in paper form if wanted or needed, which obviously is not our goal, because we want to address the digital age. However, we still want to have this option because we kind of see us also as a bridge between the two worlds, the traditional finance world. I do not want to say regressive here. I don't want to offend anyone, obviously, but and the progressive and advanced blockchain space. And also our platform, which is in the finance, like these two aspects, issuance and administration, are live today in November 2020, and at the end of this year we will also have an investor suite ready, which will then also cover the life cycle of these tokenized entities, these tokenized assets, from an investor perspective, where investors can register in terms of KYC and AML, and subsequently also manage their tokens, so to say. So this is our product. And in terms of how we offer our product to our clients is that, as mentioned, we provide this blueprint and templates for free. So usually the establishment process is something where we just assist. And then we have basically a subscription-based fee to our platform where our clients can then manage their tokenized entities throughout their entire life cycle. And also what's interesting to mention is that the any type of ERC20 compatible wallet, such as MetaMask, for instance, can be integrated to our platform. So therefore, this acts as a custody for these tokens, as we do not want to kind of cope with the aspect of custody. We just want to provide our clients a software which is highly customizable as well. So for instance, if you want to tokenize your podcast, you could have, it would mean my shares of some startup radio podcast, for instance. It will not be amazing blocks mentioned anywhere, for instance. So therefore, we also have the chance of white labeling our solution. And there we also have our core product obviously consists of these two aspects, but as we are not a custodian, we also want to obviously tackle the issue with a liquid secondary market. A primary market is obviously very easily doable, but a secondary market, especially a liquid secondary market, is quite a substantial issue, I would say, still, especially present in the STO space, because the market cap is quite low, the amount of traders as well. So therefore, we are in the process of establishing a lot of collaborations and partnerships with custodians around Liechtenstein, but also from other places in the world, because we kind of want to have this direct access to these exchanges for our clients, because this will also in the future especially allow our clients to integrate DeFi into tokenized assets. For those that may not know DeFi is decentralized finance, one of the latest trends in the blockchain space. You can kind of compare it right now to the early stages of the ICO craze, I would say, with a lot of interesting projects emerging on the one hand, but also a lot of scams emerging. But DeFi is very promising. And here, even these tokenized assets could be in the future integrated as collateral, for instance. So for taking a loan without a central intermediary like a bank having to provide you this loan. And then you kind of, use your house as collateral for this bank, but you would be able to use it as collateral in these DeFi protocols without having to kind of give the power to a centralized authority. And I think this is also a very interesting use case that we will provide in the future, because here, for us, or for the tokenization space in general, liquidity is quite an issue on the one hand. And also for the DeFi space, liquidity is still an issue. And therefore, by being able to kind of bridge these worlds, to speak in these terms again, we will be able to integrate real-world assets, which is a $1 trillion market, obviously, into these protocols, which would then in turn allow a much more liquid market for these DeFi protocols, but also allow us to kind of create a complete, complex, and healthy secondary market in the future.
We may add that Amazing Blogs, the reason you're here, was a participant in the Crypto Asset Conference, which is of course organized by our favorite Philipp Sandner. We are producing this, by the way, in media partnership. That's why you saw the logo in the beginning. When you've been talking, I was taking some notes, and actually what I found interesting is the secondary market, that you try to provide some liquidity. For everybody who's not familiar with the capital markets, there's some securities out there you can trade easily. You will always find a seller and a buyer for Apple. But if you, on the other hand, have bonds that mature in 2030 from the city of Munich, it may be a lot harder. So they are already securities who lack liquidity, but for those it makes more sense to put them on blockchain to lower the administrative burden. People may not know, but when we're talking about custodian, we are not talking about a legal custodian who takes care of a child. We are talking about a legal entity, some specialized type of bank that is actually safekeeping the security, the assets of the people who deposit them there. And finally, what I wrote down is when you talked about like collateralization. So basically you can put something in a legal entity, tokenize it, and then hand out those tokens. That would be like the next generation for what we partly know today as crowdfunding. So basically you don't get any debt shares in terms of participation in a crowdfunding campaign, but you can actually get real tokens. Is that something you're talking about?
Yes, that is correct, because with tokenization in general, you have the chance to kind of, morph illiquid assets, such as, for instance, a classic car, patents, real estate, art, just about anything. And just by the way, at Amazing Blocks, we can customize our solution to all of these use cases. You can kind of morph all of these assets into highly 24/7 tradable asset classes. Some say, okay, you create a whole new asset class. Others say, okay, you kind of just enhance current structures from whatever perspective you want to consider it. Still, it allows you to have a liquid market and liquid trade for any of these assets, which is quite substantial from my perspective, because if you look at real estate, for instance, or let's just stay with real estate for now. Real estate is a very illiquid market. It's one of the most valuable markets out there, and I think even people that are not too familiar with financial markets understand the value of real estate. However, basically, when you own a house, just to be completely blunt, when you own a house, the money that this house is worth is just basically fictional, or it's in the air. You do not have direct access to this money. It's not liquid. It's not integrated into the market. And if you tokenize real estate, this changes, because now you have a legal representation in the form of tokens for this house, for the ownership in this house, and which can be 24/7 traded. So you can decide, hey, do I want to raise some capital and sell some share of my house, or as an investment firm, do I want to have like a portfolio of real estate from all over the world, for instance, which is much more liquid than the current real estate portfolios out there. And also from the perspective of other assets such as patents or art, which are kind of exotic assets, especially when talking about patents. Patents is it's an intellectual property, of course, which can sometimes pave the way for $1 billion enterprise. But where is the value in these patents? Like there you cannot monetize these patents. There's a lot of companies out there that have very from a theoretical or neutral perspective, have very valuable patents, but they cannot really leverage them because they made the invention, but they do not know how to go on because they have no money, no monetary needs in terms of actually taking advantage of their invention. And also because of when looking at registration processes all across the world, the patent industry is a very fragmented one. So basically, sure, the EU has a kind of standardized model in place, but if you register a patent in the EU, this doesn't mean that this patent is registered all across the world. And so therefore, to just register it in EU, you have costs. Then you have to register it all across the world. You have costs. So therefore, these are costs that the startup usually cannot, pay. And therefore, kind of, making this patent or morphing this patent into a liquid asset, you will be able to actually, on the one hand, from an investor perspective, trade into the brightest innovations in our contemporary world. And kind of have a hedge against inflation and an alternative to traditional shares, because you can now have equity in these patents. And from the perspective of a company innovating these patents, you have the chance to actually raise funds without having to kind of sell your entire company to a VC or having to take an enormous loan from a credit institute. Now you can kind of have a crowdfunding, like you mentioned, also with these patents in form of actually, funding it with a monetary influx that comes from, sharing equity in these patents, and also from other industries such as the art industry, which is a very, I think art is one of the most important aspects of humanity in terms of it, the role it inherits in representing what humans or ages were influenced by, basically, and in terms of social economic aspects as well. And here the market is very also illiquid, just to use this word again on the one hand, and also artwork has a high value such as real estate as well, but this value is not really in our current financial system. It's not integrated. And if you tokenize art, you on the one hand can skip all these intermediaries. From a perspective of an artist, you do not have to go through auction houses to sell your art. You do not have to pay the fees. You do not have to kind of pay someone to list your projects, because you can do everything yourself. You can basically raise funds for your artwork and turn it into asset class through peer-to-peer payments and peer-to-peer fundraising and peer-to-peer emission of equity. And therefore, for instance, you could say in the future, hey, I want to invest 10 euros or $100 into Mona Lisa, for instance, just to dream big. But this is a possibility that comes across with this, and therefore we believe that the tokenization, and especially legally compliant tokenization, can here kind of be the go-to place. And when going back to the custody solutions that you mentioned, on the one hand, you have these custody solutions which are kind of similar to banks, like the traditional exchanges such as Binance, KuCoin, and so on. But on the other hand, which is also something that is kind of newly emerging, are decentralized exchanges, where there's no centralized market maker. It's a decentralized trading platform with no intermediary in place kind of fulfilling these transactions. And I think this is quite an interesting perspective and solution in the future, where we can have like a financial market that on the one hand integrates all of the assets, not only traditional company shares, but all assets in this world, which can also provide a lot of financial inclusion to people that may own valuable resources but do not know how to leverage this, especially in lower developed countries, in terms of people that do not have access to the current financial structure that we have in the Western world as of now. And on the other hand, this can provide a lot of liquidity and investment to kind of forgotten asset classes, for instance, like classic cars as well. Classic cars have an immense intrinsic value. Sure, everybody loves their 1950 Ferrari, but no one can really have access to it, because It's in the hands of some large volume or individuals which have these cars in their garages, and no one really can see them. But with tokenization, for instance, just to kind of finish my thought here, you could technically say, okay, you turn this classic car into an asset class with equity. You can sell this equity to shareholders, and then you subsequently additionally issue equity coupon tokens, which will grant you, for instance, 1 week of driving this car. And then you say, okay, hey, this driving this car for 1 week will cost you amount X. And then after this payment is made of amount X is split up between all the shareholders or token holders in this equity. And then you can have like a dual growth model. On the one hand, you earn money in terms of the traditional supply and demand principle and a hedge against inflation with this asset class. And on the other hand, you're kind of generating a traditional or a passive income with this, which is kind of similar to dividends, but much more reliable. Also, when talking about machines, where you can integrate pay-per-use systems and then issue the amount that is earned there to the respective token holders, or also what is kind of an interesting model is equity cashback, which I'm currently kind of doing some research in, because it also gives you the chance to kind of, when you make payments somewhere, when you, for instance, buy your shoes from Adidas, that you will in turn kind of have like a micro investing, that in terms of receiving small fractions of equity, which is also something that is possible with tokens. So I believe there's a lot of potential here, and at Amazing Blocks we really are on the verge of or on the cusp of this industry, and I believe looking in the future, we're just at the tip of the iceberg.
When you've been talking, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but just one word answer. Could you also, as you discussed with the patent, could you also tokenize a trademark and therefore enable a small startup to leverage that and put a trademark in a container and tokenize it to enable a startup to register it globally?
Yeah, that's possible. That is no issue at all.
Great. And we've been talking about quite a lot. You talked about classic cars. What I had in mind is we did an interview back in 2018. It was published on the 24th of May, 2018. You can, of course, find it down here in the show notes. What you talked about, classic cars, Rally Road is already doing it in the US with cars as a normal equity entity. I think we're now recording more than 40 minutes. I do believe we would still have a lot to talk, but everybody who'd like to learn more can go down here in the show notes, can reach out to you directly in LinkedIn. There you'll also find the Amazing Blogs website, as well as articles and the PDF of the Liechtenstein Token Act, and of course the link to the Crypto Asset Conference, which already took place at time of this recording, but there will be another one coming up fall 2021. Only thing left for me to say is thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you here, and I do believe there was a lot of very interesting content here.
Thank you, Joe. Also from my side, it's great to be here, and thank you for this opportunity you provided us. I love what you're doing with your podcast, kind of providing a platform to these young startups and enabling them to kind of speak to the world. So again, thank you very much. And anyone that's interested in finding out more, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.